Hi, chemistry students. This is Mrs. Mitzik, and I am going to give you some notes on section 7.1, part 1. Let's get going. So today we're just going to be talking about ionic compounds, and our first question is, what is the electrical charge of an ionic compound? Well, what is an ionic compound? An ionic compound is a compound composed of cations, positive ions, and anions, negative ions, or metals and nonmetals. Although they're composed of ions, though, ionic compounds overall are electrically neutral. The reason behind that is because your number of protons, of course, never changes, and your number of electrons are the same too within the compound. Sure, one of them's gaining electrons, the other one's losing electrons, but they're all within that same compound. So you have the same number of protons and electrons, zero charge for the compound. So when we're looking at ionic bonds, those are the electrostatic forces that hold ions together in an ionic compound. When you see the word force, you should be thinking about some kind of attraction or bonding going on. When you're looking at this diagram right here, I've got sodium, I've got chlorine. Sodium we know has 1 valence electrons, it's in the alkali metals, group 1A. We know that chlorine is in group 7A, the halogens, having 7 valence electrons. The goal is to be stable like a noble gas, to have 8 electrons in its outermost energy level. So you can see the dot structures are set up there using the valence electrons, and the electron configuration has also been given. Why? To show you that sodium, having that 1 valence electron in its outermost energy level, doesn't really help it in terms of being stable. Also, if you look at chlorine, chlorine is so darn close to being full for its outermost energy level. So it makes sense that these are a really good pairing. The electron from sodium will go or be attracted to the chlorine, and sodium then will be stable, having that S2P6 or octet arrangement of neon, and chlorine is going to be happy having its octet arrangement fulfilled, so it can be like argon's stable configuration. So that's the basis behind that ionic compound formation. When you look at a chemical formula shows the number of atoms of each element in the smallest representative unit of a substance. So if you're looking at something like strontium nitride, when you look at it, the subscripts tell you how many you have of each atom. So if there's none, you just assume it's 1. So this is showing us that we have 1 atom of strontium. The 2 goes for everything in the formula, or in the parentheses, not for the formula, the parentheses. So when you're looking at this, there's 2 nitrogens, 2 times 1 is 2, and then there's 2 times 3, or 6 oxygen atoms. So again, the chemical formula is showing you how many atoms you have of each element. When you're looking at ionic compounds, they don't exist as just strontium nitride. No, there's a great attraction within the compound itself and within the substance itself. And they end up making these really nice repeated patterns. And those patterns oftentimes become very crystalline or geometric or three-dimensional. So if you're looking at salt, NaCl, you will be able to see that nice cubic formation for those salt crystals underneath the microscope. It's really cool. And this is really indicative of ionic compounds. Most of them have this nice crystalline structure. So what is a formula unit? A formula unit is the lowest whole number ratio of ions in an ionic compound. An example would be like calcium fluoride, CaF2, or sodium phosphate, Na3PO4. Okay, we know it's got to be the lowest whole number ratio. For example, it wouldn't be Ca2F4. Ionic compounds do not do that. Their formula units are discrete packets of low whole number ratios. Keep that in mind. Let's now look at the 3 properties of ionic compounds. As I said, they like to be crystalline, and the majority of ionic compounds are crystalline at room temperature. And you can see some examples of a really pretty arrangement. Why is that happening? Because there's large attractive forces resulting in a very stable structure. That changing up of the electrons causes a more solid fit between those atoms. And that more solid fit then makes for a very, very nice crystalline arrangement. Isn't that pretty? That's really nice too. In Northern Ireland, there's a place called Giant's Causeway, and if you look at it, if you're on the cliffs by I think it's the North Sea, I'm not sure, I'm not good with geography, but Giant's Causeway, if you look over at the cliffs off, if you're sitting on one cliff, you'll see this crystalline structure. It's hexagonal, and it's hexagonal all the way down the cliff face. I mean, it shows a long hexagonal tube, and when you go walk on top of it, it's like you're walking on this hexagonal tiles feature. Very, very cool. And that's definitely showing an ionic compound. Second property of ionic compounds, high melting points. Because of that very tight attraction between the ions, the cations and the anions, it is very difficult to pull apart that ionic bond. So you have to add a considerable amount of energy. So it takes a lot of energy to melt an ionic compound. For example, sodium chloride, salt, you would have to get it up to about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit in order for it to melt. Pretty crazy. So, would you expect to find sodium chloride in underground rock deposits as a solid, liquid, or gas? Pause and think about why. Definitely is going to be a solid form. Sodium chloride is an ionic compound. It's got a metal and a nonmetal, so there's that very tight ionic bond, making it very, very difficult to make it into a liquid or a gas without a lot of energy. So sodium chloride underground, where it's cooler, definitely is going to be a solid. The third property of ionic compounds is that an ionic compound can conduct electric current or conduct electricity when melted. Another word for melted is molten or dissolved in water. If I melt, excuse me, if I melt or if I put sodium chloride in water, what ends up happening is that orderly crystal structure breaks down. So now we've got ions floating around, and those ions are very good at propagating electric current. So that's the reasoning behind it. So again, when you have sodium chloride melted, okay, you've disrupted those ionic bonds. So you have sodium and you have sodium ions, you have chloride ions floating around, and those sodium and chloride ions are very good at propagating electric current. Same thing's true with when you dissolve it in water. What happens is the attraction between the elements of sodium chloride and water is those elements are more attracted to the water than to each other, and so they get pulled apart into ions, again creating electric current. Another example of melted or molten sodium chloride is the solar facility, and again it's used to generate electricity. So, multiple choice question, when can ionic compounds conduct an electric current? Pause the video, answer it, and then restart. And you should have said when melted or dissolved in water. Here are the key concepts that you should have gathered as we went through this. And these are the glossary terms or the terminology you should get. And there's one more. Seriously, there is one more. And we're not doing point 2, formula unit. So have a good day. If you have questions, ask your teacher and do the check for understanding that follows in the folder that you're given for today in chemistry. Have a great day.